Namaste Bharat, hello India, and a very warm good afternoon to Dubai as well. This is me, Preeti Chaudhary, your host for today, and here is another session of VC Spotlight featuring Amit Grover, who's the founder and managing partner of Grover and Company. Concept curation and host, yours truly, Preeti Chaudhary. VC Spotlight is all about drawing out the human from behind the VC profile to getting to know their funds, their methodologies, the process, and everything else in between. So, with that, let me not keep you very far from this conversation. A couple of quick reminders to everybody attending today. This is a conversation and a dialogue, so comments and questions are warmly welcome into this discussion. Please place them into the comment section of this LinkedIn Local India Live VC Spotlight with me, your host, Preeti Chaudhary. And my guest today is Amit Grover, who's the founder and managing partner of Grover and Company. Hello, Amit. How are you today?
Hi, Preeti. I'm very, very well.
Welcome to the show, a show which is all about putting the spotlight onto the VCs, getting
Yeah.
the humans from behind the profiles, getting to know about your fund, the methodology, the domains you serve, the process, and everything else in between. Thank you for
Superb.
logging in today, all the way from Dubai. And I'm excited to get this conversation started, to get to know a little bit more about you as a person and of the fund that you are bringing about, which is already in the market. First things first, though, Amit, let's put a little bit of context to this whole conversation. So it would help our audience tremendously if you tell us really who Amit Grover is, where's he from, what's he doing, and why is he doing whatever he is doing right now. So it's over to you, Amit, and take us down this journey, please, so that we can actually set the whole context and get rolling on this conversation. Thank you again.
Sure, Preeti. Thank you. It'll be my pleasure to reflect on where I come from and why I do what I do and some of my journey. So to all your audiences, a warm welcome from Dubai. I hail from New Delhi. I was born and raised in New Delhi. I did my high school and undergraduate studies from Delhi, post which I went on to work for some large companies in India. I started as a management trainee in ITC Limited, went through various businesses of theirs. Then I kind of was a founding team member in early days of Barista Coffee Company and built that chain in India and South Asia. Post which I joined a very exciting beverage company called Seagram India. I was managing the international made foreign liquor portfolio. Having spent about 10 years doing what I did in the corporate sector of India, I wanted to upskill my academia. So I relocated to New Zealand, Wellington, the capital city, and I did a full-time MBA program from the University of Wellington. Post which I think what I was bit by the entrepreneurial bug and I wanted to kind of get into management consulting. So really consolidate all my corporate experience along with the knowledge that I'd gained at the MBA and deliver a model to small, medium businesses within Australia and New Zealand on international expansion. So it's been about 13 years. I established my company, Grover and Company, as a consulting practice in New Zealand in the year 2007. So we are in 2020. So it's 13 years running. There's been a lot of ups and downs. There's been very exciting times, some not that exciting times. But having said that, it's all turned out well. So we've expanded from New Zealand into Australia, from Australia into the Middle East, and from Middle East into the UK. We've had a long journey with plethora of clients that we worked with. We worked with cross industry. I've learned heaps. I've made great friends. And I'm excited to start this new journey in 2020 to the extension of my consulting business, getting into venture capital investment.
Thank you so much for that, Amit, and that sets the context really well. And that brings me to my next logical question. It
Yes.
is basically how and why did you find your way into the world of venture capital funding,
Yes.
And uh, when did you decide to sort of start a fund and how did you go about that? Please tell us a bit more on that. Thank you.
Certainly. So, look, to be very honest, the thought of launching a venture capital fund is not new to me. I had been thinking about it for quite some time, probably about 2 to 3 years. but I actually went down to doing it in 2020. So when in my consulting days, I would, kind of work with a plethora of companies and advise them on international expansion and growth strategy. Every probably person in management consulting would feel that the likelihoods of projects succeeding in terms of people implementing what you're telling them to is really dependent on the company that you're giving the advice to. I mean, you can't force it down their throat. I mean, your job is to give advice. Their job is whether they take it or they don't take it. So it was kind of very frustrating for me for a better half of the decade that, look, I'm working with so many companies and giving them advice, and very few companies really go down to implementing that advice. And that was a very frustrating experience for me, because if people don't implement your advice, you really don't get success stories. So I would often have these discussions in the boardroom with my team that there's got to be a better way of doing it. There's got to be a better way of implementing this advice. And to be very honest, Preeti, the answer was staring at my face. I'm like, unless you don't have skin in the game, you cannot really drive implementation and drive some of the strategies that you're convinced that companies would do very well if they implement that. So it was really out of that thought that started mulling in me, I think since 2017, that, look, we've got to find a better way of doing it. And I've talked about, becoming a venture capitalist with many people. And honestly, I might be doing this fund for myself as a first endeavor. But given the fact that I've worked with the volume of people I have in the last 13 years, we've dealt with multiple hedge funds, private equity players, and venture capitalists, and help a lot of portfolio companies of theirs to expand overseas. So, in terms of both raising capital to bootstrap expansion for clients or raising debt, we were quite well acquainted with the industry. We were working with industry players on a regular basis. So look, this field was not new to me. I was interacting with them on a daily basis. So really, I mean, it's 2017 when I thought enough is enough. I'm going to kind of go ahead and start, really thinking about diversifying from consulting into venture capital investment. And, I must say, given our bandwidth of operations from New Zealand to Dubai to London, it's always not a very easy move to disrupt everything and then kind of change course. So it's taken us about 3 years, but it's been well aligned and well received. And 2020, we embarked on a brand new journey. So we are 100% out of consulting and 100% into venture capital investment.
Brilliant. Pivots are what life is all about, actually. And if you dare, is when you win. It's all about, again, being that ant, slow and steady, pivoting, doing things differently. And that is what actually counts and makes a difference. So, spot on with that. That brings me to a little bit more deep info onto your fund that you have launched. So basically it's a scope, size, the sectors that you're looking at, what's your target market, when did you launch, all those little tidbits which I'm sure will be pretty useful to the audience that's logged in today. Over to you. Thank you.
So look, we launched the fund, Grover and Company Impact Ventures, in 2020. In October is when we really went to the market to start recruiting companies. Now, currently the status is the fund is under formation. We are trying to raise $50 million to invest in early stage companies with market validated products. We are very, very sector focused. We are not at all sector agnostic. I think the only area we are agnostic in is the kind of countries and regions we invest in, which is the entire globe. But we are very, very focused, and that focus really, Preeti, comes from my own experience and my team's experience. I personally have large volumes of experience in both the CPG category, the FMCG category, as well as food and beverage brands. Starting from brand licensing, franchising to very complicated distribution and supply chain models. I've worked with companies both in my corporate career as well as in my entrepreneurial journey. So that's the experience I want to bring on the board. And I'm sure you've skimmed through my profile as well as my website, and you'll see the kind of competencies my team has. So to a large extent, hospitality and food and beverage is the area of focus and specialization and knowledge that we hold. So we are very focused as a fund. We are trying to work with about 50 companies in total. And really the scope of companies range from starting from Australia to the United States and all the countries in between. We are very focused on plant-based food and beverage. So we're talking about plant-based alternative proteins, plant-based alternative dairies, plant-based cloud kitchens, plant-based ready meals, both frozen and fresh. Then we are looking at plant-based snacks. And in addition to that, we are also looking at contract manufacturing and distribution, because we feel there's a huge gap in the market with the number of brands that are getting into plant-based food and the number of manufacturers that are available to service them. So that's an area of extreme interest. But beyond that, we are also kind of, building a bit of speculation and punt, if I might use that word, on cell-based and cellular agriculture, which is also very popularly known as fermentation, and of course the cell-based meats that are very similar to the stem cell therapy that you can see. So that's kind of in the research and the nascent stages at the moment. But then, hey, I mean, if you want to play big, then you've got to invest on things that are still not in the market with the hope that this is going to become the next big thing. So we are concentrating a small proportion of our fund on these new age technologies versus also kind of running the traditional plant-based food and beverage portfolios. So that's kind of a bit about our focused area. In terms of our investments, we do claim that, we can kind of help companies to raise from $250,000 right up to $2.5 million per venture. But it really depends on the size of the company, scale of the company, the life cycle the company is at currently, in what areas do they really need our help. And look, I'd like to speak about our investment thesis or our methodology in a bit more detail. But to give you kind of an overview, we are very active investors. We are not passive investors. So in hindsight, what I'm trying to say that our model is not only giving capital to companies, but really working with them hand on hand and, kind of navigating their way through success as well as their growth. So that's a bit about an overview of where the fund is at the moment.
Sure. And what is the fund size? What is how many dollars? I think
So
it
that's
is
what I just said,
50.
that it's $50 million. So we are raising
Thank you.
about $50 million. But look, I mean, who knows? We are going to close our first close in the end of Q1 of 2021, and our final close in the end of Q1 2022. Look, if you're lucky, then we'll be very overly subscribed, and we could even reach our $100 million. But look, I don't want to kind of peg my hopes very high right now. I'll be happy if I reach my $50 million capital raise threshold.
Fair enough, Amit. This industry is basically booming at this moment in time, and there is a huge interest in India as well. But for the sake of the audience, I think it's still a very niche sort of a domain wherein there's to a layman there is not enough knowledge and everything else. So it'll help immensely if you can give me a brief overview of the world in terms of what this industry is all about, in terms of the four categories that you've spoken about that you're looking at investing, and secondly then from Indian perspective, so the Indian outlook, and what is the opportunity number there over there, and something very substantial, please. Any success stories that you've seen in the world or in India so far? That would really help.
Certainly,
over to you.
absolutely. I'd love to talk about it. So look, you're right, Preeti. I mean, the plant-based food sector, which constitutes of both alternative proteins and alternative dairies and all the food products in between, is a small sector. It's a niche sector. It's kind of just come about in the last 5 years. I mean, it's fairly new on the food ecosystem. Now, having said that, I mean, currently, everybody have their hopes that by 2025, the sector is expected to kind of reach a $40 billion, kind of size. And a lot of analysts also kind of hope that by 2030, this is going to literally double to about $80 billion. So, I mean, there's a lot of waiting and watching at the moment. But if you purely look at the plant-based protein aspect, that's much talked about. So I mean, this has different names. A lot of people call it mock meats. A lot of people call it alternative proteins. A lot of people call it, fake meats, whatever you want to call it. But really, the sector today is sitting at about a $10 billion. And, maybe in the next 4 to 5 years, people kind of expect just this protein sector alone to become a $15 billion enterprise sector. In terms of really giving you what's really happening in the world, like you said, that it's booming, and that's correct. And honestly, I can't say that about a lot of industries within the pandemic and the COVID-19, but it's really helped the plant-based industry. So if you look at the protein sector, in some cases, protein products have grown by 450%. In other cases, some brands have reported 140% sales, quarter on quarter, if you compare it with 2019 to 2020. Now, COVID-19 has been a blessing in disguise for this entire sector. It's been much talked about. It's got much attention. The sales volumes have been clipping. It's still worldwide, globally, a very nascent sector, very early sector So you don't have a lot of divestitures or very, very large acquisitions as compared to the other sectors that you can reflect on. But just to give you an idea, like companies like Beyond and Impossible, are absolutely, kind of driving this category for the. So you've got a couple of companies. You've got Beyond from the United States. You've got Impossible from United States. You've got Oatly, which is an oat milk company from Sweden. Then you've got David's Omni Pork, which is a part of Green Monday that's done fantastically well in the Asian context. Then you've got V2 Food from Australia, where I come from, that part of the world that's done absolutely fabulous work. On the global stage. And if you look at the capital raise that's just happened between Q1 and Q2 of 2020, I mean, companies have gone ahead and raised hundreds of millions of dollars. It started with obviously Impossible raising 200 million, Oatly raising 200 million, David from Omnipork raising 70 million. Then you've got Australian company like V2 Foods raising 55 million. So really, investors are very, very buoyant, very excited about this sector, and they're investing money. Also, what you've seen is a very big shift in consumer taste within the pandemic. And I keep stressing on this point that the pandemic has been absolutely fabulous for this sector, because it's put the pressure on people that, look, you got to think about the planet. You got to think about what you're putting in yourself. You got to eat sustainably, live sustainably. You can't take the planet for granted. Look what we are facing today. And that's, a very big eye-opener for most people. So from that perspective, I would say you've got, the major people that are driving this trend are called flexitarians. So people who both have vegan products as well as normal mainstream products. So from that perspective, at least 80% of flexitarians worldwide are trying out plant-based foods. I'm not saying that they're giving up animal protein and dairy and only having plant-based. That's not correct. But these are the major people who are trying to incorporate 1 or 2 days a week of plant-based meals in a couple of their diets. And that's the soaring sales levels, unimaginable level of sales these companies are doing. So really, on a global basis, the market is absolutely buoyant. The market has a lot of potential, and both the investment community as well as the customer sales are showing that. As far as India is concerned, I would say it's in very, very early stages. I mean, India, let's first understand the context. See, for the West, Preeti, going from eating steaks and mashed potatoes right up to eating vegan is a very big transformation. But for India, like I keep telling people that, look, the vegan revolution based on the social media and the influencers and the talk about in the West is obviously creating an impact in metropolitan cities and the youngsters, the millennials or the Generation Z, like we call it. But to be very honest, if you look at the Indian diet and you get the dairy out, so your ghee and your butter and your dahi, and if you get your animal protein out, there is nothing not vegan about dal, sabzi, roti, or chawal, dal, and sabzi. So I think we've got a big vegan, percentage in our Indian diet to start with. So the transformation is not that crazy that, you would look at it and say, this is a 360-degree turn. So I think, purely based on volumes, a lot of analysts have different ways of looking at India. I personally feel that India is in its very early stages, and it's yet to grow. So the plant-based protein sector is just under about $500 million in India. And given the population we have, a lot of analysts predict that India and China are absolutely going to be epicenters of vegan revolution in the next 5 years, and rightfully so, because a lot of people are kind of quitting dairy and getting more informed about allergies like lactose intolerance and allergies to soy, which is gluten, or peanut allergy, and shifting to more sustainable forms of food that are available. So I do believe that it's got a very, very bright future. I mean, obviously, as we know, India as a market is really driven by influencers. We really look up to our idols and kind of emulate them, and hence our cricketers are gods. So you've got the likes of Virat Kohli, who's gone vegan. You've got the likes of Shahid Kapoor, who's gone vegan. Then you've got Kangana Ranaut. Look, I'm a big fan of Kangana Ranaut, but I mean, she's gone vegan, and rightfully so. So you've got a lot of these people going vegan that have huge fan following and masses, and I'm sure the customers would follow them. Then you've got the likes of Bollywood celebrities like Ritesh and Janelia launching their alternative protein brand, which is Imagine Meats. And I think it's absolutely wonderful that people with influence, people with resources, and people with quite a broad fan base are driving this, kind of vegan ecosystem, and that's going to be pivotal for India. In terms of companies, you don't have huge success stories in India like you have in the West, because we are still quite new. But you've got fantastic, products coming out of Good Dot, which is a Rajasthan-based company into plant-based, and they're doing some fantastic work. Both Abhishek and Deepak are absolutely transforming the sector. Then you've got the likes of Good Milk, which is a plant milk. Like, I've not personally tried it, so I can't really comment about it, but I have heard a lot of good things about that. Then you've got the likes of Evo Food, that's kind of working on an egg substitute. And, India is the third largest consumer of eggs in the world. So I think, any kind of disruption and shift in that market, you're talking about billions of dollars. So you've got some great companies like Epigamia that kind of came in early in the days and was doing a range of coconut yogurts and, different types of milk. So look, there are companies that are moving ahead, that there are companies that are innovating, they're incubators. I am a part of many incubators, and I'm surprised how many plant-based companies are coming about, and all these are youngsters under the age of 30 that are just driving this trend further. So I personally feel, and I must agree with certain analysts, that India is going to be huge in the next 5 or 6 years in the plant-based sector.
Brilliant to hear that, and I can personally talk from my experience of lactose intolerance. I had such a hard time when I used to live in China, um, you know,
Hmm.
um, just for till a few years back, and I've lived there for like almost 8 years.
Right.
And oh my God, what grief I got from there. So I can
Hmm.
totally understand, where you're coming from when it comes to choices and what we put into our body, because at the end of the day, it's you and I who have to live with our own bodies,
Absolutely.
and so which means we need to take care of them.
Yeah.
So absolutely spot on
Hmm.
there. Thank you, Amit. That brings me on to the next thing. So what is the process of getting funded from your fund? Basically, in any business philosophy that your venture stands
Yeah.
by, what is that all
So a
about?
little while
Over
back,
to
I
you.
talked about an investment thesis, and I think it's the right time to talk about it. So how we view investments and how we work with ventures. So like I said a little while back, we are active investors. So we like to get involved in the business. We love building businesses. I've been a small business owner for the last 14 years. So I know a bit about scaling up businesses and starting them. So basically, we like to work with entrepreneurs in a hands-on capacity. We go down to kind of addressing many areas with them, starting from supply chain to contract manufacturing to retail relationships, distribution relationships, brand license, franchising. Each kind of business model that they have, we kind of give advice on them. We bring our relationships that we've built over the last 24 years in over 20 countries to the table and help them grow. And this is over and above the capital investment that we do. So to be able to work with companies, like you said, what the process is, we like to talk to companies with first a market validated product. Now, we must understand the plant-based ecosystem. There are hundreds and thousands and millions of companies jumping in every day because the sector is growing. Now, my personal kind of experience with this is 90% of the companies that are making products, whether in the plant-based dairy or plant-based protein, don't have a very good product that tastes very well. And like I said, this is the food business. If you're not going to nail taste, you are out of the market before you've got in. So I think that poses as a huge challenge till today, that to get the taste right. And really, a lot of brands, both overseas and India, has to understand to locally adapt. So if you're not going to locally adapt to the country or the region that you're going to go to, you're not going to have much success, because people's eating taste and preferences and kind of culinary behavior is of extreme importance, because it's food. So we like to address all these issues with our entrepreneurs and help them gear up for expansion. So we are really not your typical incubator or accelerator that would incubate you from ground up and help you kind of get to a threshold where you are commercially sensible. We actually come in at that stage where you are a bit commercial in terms of your sales, as well as maybe in the local area, and you're looking for a lot of support to expand you both domestically and internationally. So we kind of tend to concentrate on late seed and early Series A kind of a threshold, with ventures. Also, we are very, very picky about the ventures that we work with, because we have a very different thesis to most other VCs. So we believe that we don't want to work with hundreds of companies assuming that most of them are going to fail, and the ones that they don't are the unicorns in the making. We actually want to pick every company as a unicorn, and how we do that is, we believe that rather than kind of burning through cash. We want to look at a situation where just talking about sustainability of your products is not enough. I think people need to talk about sustainability of business models. So a company's got to break even in a reasonable time. A company's got to have a reasonable cash burn rate and kind of achieve independence with regards to bootstrapping its own growth and expansion, bootstrapping their new product development, and even creating dividend streams for their founders and investors. And if a company is not achieving that, again, I repeat, in a reasonable time frame, at least to us, it's not a solid company. And we help companies do that. So our model is very different. So most VCs would have you lock in capital for 4 years and then realize the capital investment in whichever way that goes after a 5-year term period. Whereas our model is positioned with companies to attain a break even in 2 years. And then from the 3rd year, assuming it's a 5-year investment term period, we ideally, in the ideal world, like to return the principal investment amount to all our LPs within the 5-year term period, post which it's pure profitability. So assume you gave me $1 million to invest in a company. My aim is going to be to return you that $1 million before that 5-year term period ends. And then from there on, it's pure profit. So you decide whether you want to keep the company in the portfolio and look at a initial public offering kind of route to raise capital in the public market, or you want to kind of divest the company to a large FMCG MNC, or you want to kind of grow the company even further. So the choice is really yours in terms of exit and divestiture, in which way you want to kind of carry that company. But once you've got your principal investment back, so you don't have to lock in capital for 5 years and then wait to see in which way the capital goes. So in that regard, we are very flexible. We give dividends to shareholders. And if our LPs kind of say that, look, we don't want the dividends, we rather reinvest this profit back in the company because we want higher growth, we are open to that. So we are a very flexible fund in terms of how we work with our LPs and how we work with people who believe in us. So it's really, presenting people a plethora of choices that what suits you best. And we work with them on that.
Brilliant. So flexibility is the key here. Thank you, Amit, for that. Before I move on to my next question, here is an audience question, and I will pull it right up for you. This is Rampriya Chaudhary asking, besides plant-based food, what are your thoughts of global demand for spices and plant-based medicines? Over to you,
Yeah,
Amit.
I think huge. In fact, the whole world is embracing what we produce. I mean, honestly, Preeti, when I was living overseas, I was absolutely gobsmacked with the fact that most things that are cool in the West all come from India. I mean, look at yoga. I mean, the whole world is stripping on yoga, and it really comes from India. I mean, I've seen companies take turmeric and make them into beauty products and creams and even supplements, which again comes from India. It's an antiseptic superfood in India. So to answer Mr. Rano Priya's kind of question, it's huge, absolutely huge. There's a lot of scope for spices. The whole spice trade. I mean, look. I mean, let's face it. The whole world came has invaded us, from Mughals to the Portuguese to the British, for our spices. So I mean, we are very, very well known for our spices, and the best prices probably come from India. So that demand is never going to end. And as the Indian cuisine and understanding of plant-based spices go up, that is good for health, these are superfoods, I think the demand is just going to increase. As far as the medicine question is concerned, there's a huge movement, Preeti, at the moment on alternative medicine, whether it's Ayurveda or it's using cannabis and cannabidiol in medication. A lot of people are taking a very alternate approach and view to medication. So I think this industry is just going to boom in the coming years in a huge way. And India is going to be one of the biggest suppliers and exporter of these products and spices and produce because it grows the most in India.
Absolutely, and you're spot on. That brings me to the next question here.
Yeah.
What's your number one priority for the business right now, and what has been your biggest business accomplishment so far, Amit? Over to you.
Look, I mean, end of the day, right now, my biggest priority is raising capital, because still there's enough adequate capital. We cannot kind of fuel our vision in the best possible way. And the second biggest priority, which is parallel to raising capital, is recruiting fantastic companies that we can invest in, getting superb entrepreneurs that are hardworking, driven, and visionary, that are not afraid of rolling up their sleeves and getting into the mud and really grilling going to the ground to build a fantastic future for themselves and their companies. As far as my business success is concerned, look, it's too early to say on my fund because we are yet to kind of see the results, and we'll have to wait for 5 years for that. But in my previous running my consulting company for 13 years, what I really see as my biggest accomplishment is as an immigrant going to New Zealand, for education, and then starting a business from a country that I don't belong to, from a place I don't have any social or professional networks in, and then building a company that actually, becomes a multinational company in 13 years. I mean, look, Preeti, I come from a very middle-class, modest family. So to be able to fuel something like this that I've done today, I personally take it as quite a big accomplishment, given the fact that I don't come from influence, I don't come from money. So it's all been an organic growth. I've seen some very, very hard days where I've slept in my car because I couldn't, kind of pay rent. I've worked with multiple shared offices. Look, I started my business out of a cafe, just myself and a mobile phone and a laptop, because when I started the business, we didn't really have the likes of hot desks and shared offices back then. So, from there to kind of having 4 corporate centers in the world and a team that I do from some of the best institutions in the world, I personally find it quite kind of, accomplishing, if I might kind of put it that way.
Absolutely spot on. Anybody that does anything out of the ordinary, that is an accomplishment in itself. And here is a compliment for you, which I'm going to read out. Unfortunately, I do not know the name of the person. I am so sorry. Your settings are interfering here and we can't see the name. But they say, I once had a word with Mr. Amit. He's quite an open minded and experienced individual that is more like a mentor and a friend rather than a typical VC. So, thank you for that.
Thank you, whoever it is, and I'm glad that I could add value to you in whatever way or form. And thank you for that compliment. It really means a lot.
Yep, absolutely well done. And here is the next one. What do you think is the biggest strength of your company, and what is your future vision when it comes to taking the fund from 0 to 10 to 100 to 1,000, whatever it may be? Over to you.
Look, my biggest strength of my company is the fact that we do actively invest, which means we are active in all the investments. We work with entrepreneurs very closely. The second biggest strength of my company is that we are very sector focused in the food and beverage line, where we have vast amounts of knowledge, vast amounts of experience, and even vaster amounts of relationships in multiple countries in the world that we could get to entrepreneurs and fast track their growth and expansion process. The third biggest strength I would say about my company is we are really not a company focused on buying and selling companies. So unlike a typical VC that invests in a company with a thought process that I'm going to flick it off in 5 years and make my margin money. Now, I'm not saying that we won't entertain good deals that come to the table, but that's not the motivation that we invest in companies. We want to build companies ground up, brick by brick, stage by stage. We want to enjoy the journey with the entrepreneur and also kind of build the company to be sustainable, whether we divest out of it or keep it in the portfolio or it changes hands. Either ways, the company would be profitable, a visionary company that we see as a very, very long-term vision in terms of both existence, growth, and market dominance. So, we are not very short-term people just thinking about buying a company, 3 years later selling it, making a margin, and then on to the next project. So we might be a VC fund, because of the threshold of 50 million that we operate as a small fund, but we kind of operate like private equity, if you understand what I mean. So they have similar value systems to what they believe in growing businesses. They believe in adding far more value to a business than just money. And look, we want to work with companies. So we feel it's as much our responsibility to grow the investment in the company as it's the responsibility of the venture owner. So we kind of, operate from that mindset. As far as where my vision of taking the fund, I don't honestly measure that vision by whether I'm doing a 50 million fund or 100 or a 200 or 500. Money is just a number that, keeps a tab. But to be very honest, my vision, Preeti, is beyond money. I am very, very driven on impact and sustainability as a subject. And that comes from the fact that, look, I was like any other youngster, partying hard and living life and living to the extreme. In 2013, I had a life-changing incident where I almost lost my life. And that was the turning point where I started going towards the flexitarian, becoming a vegan, and I started looking at life with a very different prism. I'd kind of come to a realization that enough is enough. We've just taken so much from the planet without giving it back what we need to. So this was in my mind for a very, very long time, that the day I launch my own fund, I'm going to be in the impact investing line, which means that I want to do my own bit. I'm not claiming, Preeti, that I'm going to change the world. Please don't get me wrong. But I'm going to do my own bit towards climate change, towards love for animals, because, if you look at the livestock production, dairy and meat consumes over 70% of farmland and is responsible for over 80% of greenhouse emissions. So if you look at those staggering figures, and forget about that, even in terms of dairy and meat consumption that we consume today, look, dairy and meat is not produced the way it was once produced, let's say 50 years, 60 years back, when our ancestors did that, without pesticides, insecticides, hormone injections, and all that the cattle is given for higher yield and production, which is very, very bad for the human body. So today, the situation is that, if I can kind of, the damage that is caused by climate change, as well as the health services and the spends on health services, is almost 1.5 trillion US dollars a year, which is just shy of the Indian economy. So I want to do my part, and I'm really passionate about, taking a bit of that pressure off, in my own way and form. So I think my vision to answer that question is way beyond just money. I think I really want to make a difference. I really want to do impact. I really want to kind of clean up the climate and protect animals. So it's a bit beyond money.
Thank you for that. And I think it is indeed very heartening, because if somebody takes the first step, then you find other people coming and joining in and making a link. And then it sort of gets into a ripple effect, and then eventually a revolution. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Here is another audience question. This is also from Ramapriya Chaudhary. I know you've addressed bits of it earlier in this particular answer, but then what is the exit time you typically look at? They want to know.
Look, a fund is a closed-ended fund for 5 years. So obviously, as the fund dictates in terms of the structure, we would look at an exit in 5 years. But however, if there's a fantastic deal on the table where we feel that both the venture owners as well as the LPs of the fund can really benefit from their exit, we can look at an exit in the 3rd to the 4th year. It's a little difficult exiting before the 3rd year because the investment doesn't really outlay unless it's an exception. But generally, I would say the rule of thumb is 5 years, and most companies can achieve that in about 4 years. So yeah, I would be safe enough to say about a 5-year time period.
Fair enough. Now then, would there be any advice that you would like to give someone who's thinking of starting, scaling up, or getting funding their own business? And here would be two parts, Amit, actually. One would be for your particular domain, for the plant-based industry and all the medicines and all of that. And the other one is more generic sort of an advice. What would you say to them?
Look, I'll first try to address the first part of it, which is the plant-based, because I'm quite deeply involved. Number one, I say you got to kind of build your product on taste. Like I said before, if your venture is producing products that is not tasty, you can forget about scaling it up. Number two, your product's going to kind of tick the box in terms of health. Then number three, climate, and number four, love for animals. But beyond that, your venture really has to be sustainable. So to kind of test your sustainability, you've got to locally adapt. You have to understand the market that you're kind of building the product in, what the customers demand, and what their taste and preferences could be. Look, disruption is great, and I'm all for disruption. But calculated, well thought of disruption is what makes you successful. It's not just disruption for the sake of it. That if people are going west, I'm going to go south. I mean, the south has to lead somewhere. So the reality is that you've got to kind of understand your market. You have to understand your customers, and even beyond the market and customers, you have to understand food. Now I have people like accountants becoming, becoming food entrepreneurs, and they have no idea about food. Food's not as easy that you make it in the kitchen and then you start selling. You've got food science involved for shelf life stability and all the approvals. You've got to have understanding of contract manufacturing and supply chain. That where are you going to produce? Are you going to produce yourself? Do you have the capability to produce yourself in terms of all the know-how? Or you want to subcontract that out? Who's your contractor? What minimum amount of quantities? So rather than first jumping into the game and taking a leap of faith, I at least advocate, and this is very my personal opinion, and people vary with it. I personally feel that you should research, you should do some study, and in the ideal world, if you can, even without money, work for a food company, even if it's without money, to really gain that practical experience that when you go out yourself, you know the tricks of the trade. So I believe that, once you research well, study well, talk to people, understand what you're getting into from a product perspective, from a manufacturing perspective, from a market perspective, from your consumer perspective, who you want to sell to, and with some of the competitors that are trying to do a similar product, if not exactly similar, but substitute products to yours. With this holistic idea about what you're trying to do, I think step into it to do that. Now, in terms of raising capital for your venture, I'm not going to give you a politically correct answer. It's going to be very treacherous. It's going to be very painful. You have to be ready to kind of go through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rejections, because if you're trying to raise venture capital, look, mate, more people are going to look at you pessimistically, be the devil's advocate. It's not as simple and straightforward as you think it's going to be. So if you don't have the stomach to take a lot of rejection in life, but yet keep moving forward, I think you shouldn't attempt this. Well, some people could be lucky getting it in just few meetings, and they are the lucky ones, but don't make that the precedent of how everything goes. It's a tough process. It's a tough process, very tough getting money from people. So, and the second part of your question was generic. Now, look, whether it's plant-based venture or it's an industrial manufacturing or it's ITEF or whatever it is, it's a business after all. That has to create value to both its customers and shareholders. So to create value to customers is the same principle. You got to know your market, you got to know your product or service, you got to kind of understand who you're going to sell to, what their demands and needs are, and kind of devise your product and price it accordingly. As far as your shareholders are concerned, then you got to balance their expectations, imagine what kind of understand what their expected returns might be and what the market could give you. So the expected return expectation versus what the market can create could have a gap. So you have to very successfully manage that gap and balance that expectation to be able to keep both of those customers and shareholders happy. So I don't think the principles on plant-based is very different from generic. It's a business and an economic activity. So the same principles really apply. You just have to adapt it as per the industry that you're in.
Absolutely spot on. And another very important aspect, I think, is entrepreneurship is a very lonely journey. So we have to all be ready to dig deep within ourselves and make sure that all our mental faculties are in the right places and our bearings are right. Would you agree or not? What do you think
I
about
couldn't
that?
agree with you more. I mean, it's a lonely journey, yet not very lonely. Now, people say it's a team effort that makes a company happen, and I completely agree with it. You can't do everything alone. But when it comes to taking risk, nobody's going to share it with you. When it comes to taking the kind of leap, nobody's going to jump into the well with you. And that's the hard reality of an entrepreneur. Now, if you are, see Preeti, what I see more than oftentimes is people are in love with the fact of becoming an entrepreneur and all the freedom that comes with it, all the power that comes with it, and all the kind of self-actualization that comes with it. But actually walking the talk and going through that journey of becoming an entrepreneur, very few people have the discipline, B, the work ethic, and C, the patience to really slog it out and do the hard work that is needed, and not get returns for years after years after years, but still have the motivation on, and do everything to keep the lights on. So it's a very, very hard journey and a very lonely, because most people don't understand what drives you. I mean, most people call you eccentric, that your business is not doing well, the economy is failing, why won't you leave this and do something else? Because they can't see what you can. And what people don't understand, they can't relate to. So it is, in a hindsight, a very, very lonely journey.
Yep, technical glitches they happen,
Yeah,
but here we are
I know.
back on. This is what work
Sure.
from home is all about, and
I know.
things are absolutely all right. No
Yeah.
worries about that at all.
Sure.
The point is resilience and adaptability, and
Yes.
that has been totally on display right here. And that is also another trait of the right kind of mindset, the flexibility that we all carry. So, with that, last but not the least, Amit, any regrets at all in this journey so far?
Huge regret. I wish I didn't spend 10 years in my corporate experience and jumped into entrepreneurship right from my college days. I think I missed out 11 years of very valuable time in order to kind of, I probably would have been 10 years or 20 years much ahead the curve. But having said that, the experiences that I went through, the companies that I went through, the relationships that I made, the friends that I made, shaped me into the human being I am. So I guess in hindsight, all the experiences that does happen with us is an absolute recipe for success. It, pardon my being a bit spiritual coming from the Indian background, but I think everything happens for a reason. There's all a big reason, otherwise it won't have happened. So honestly, my regret is why didn't I start earlier? But also on the other hand, I really don't have any regrets in how my life has turned out. It was meant to be like this.
Brilliant. Can't agree with you more on that
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, it is all about beliefs and it is all about your own values and systems and processes. So, absolutely spot on.
Yes.
Now, then, here comes the fun part.
Sure.
I have some rapid fire questions for you. Are you ready?
No, sure. Shoot.
And the first thing that comes into your mind, please, without overthinking, without any of that, okay? Because this is just a fun bit, getting to know the
Yeah.
human from behind, who Amit
Yeah.
Grover is all about, okay?
Sure.
So here's the
Sure.
first one. Quality quality of life or quantity of life?
Quality of life.
If you have to choose a perpetually cold or hot place to live in, what would you choose?
New Zealand, perpetually cold place, mostly cold.
Okay. Is it better to being organized or attention to detail?
Uh, Difficult question. I am OCD on cleanliness and organization, and I've got a terrific attention to detail. So very difficult for me to answer that. I'm both.
Okay, no, that's fair enough. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Two things you would like to change about yourself.
I'd like to get fitter, which helps me perform. And I'd like to do more for the planet and more for the animals and social causes that I get less time for, but I'd like to do more for beyond myself and beyond my own profitable ambitions. I want to kind of contribute more to the planet.
Okay, thank you. DuckDuckGo or Google?
Google.
Okay. What is the worst place you would get stuck in or at?
Probably a DTC bus in Delhi, like one of those public buses in Delhi.
Okay. What would you do with your 15 minutes of fame?
Um, Help influence other people with fame towards the same cause as mine.
Brilliant. What product would you refuse to promote?
Cigarettes and alcohol.
Okay. What is the one thing you have always wanted to do?
Exactly what I'm doing. Become an entrepreneur, make a difference to the world, and take care of my family.
Okay. What TV sitcom family would you be a member of?
I don't see too many Indian series, but definitely, if
That's
you
okay.
ask me, Suits. I'm a big fan of Harvey Specter, so I'd love to work in his law firm. And definitely Billions. I'm also a huge fan of Bobby Axelrod and his ways, so love to be a part of Axe Capital.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
What is your favorite pet's name?
Brutus, he's my Great Dane who's 6 years old, lives with my mother, and he behaves like he's a laptop, but he's the size of an elephant.
Yeah, absolutely. Last but not the least, use one word to describe your computer ability.
Um, Average.
Okay, fair enough. And that brings us to an end of this absolutely amazing discussion. It's been
Right.
wonderful talking to you, Amit. Thank you so much. So many insights about a particular domain that I myself am not sort of so, informative about. I mean, I've done a little bit of reading, but not all that much. But
Right.
my eyes have been sort of opened a little bit more. So I'm going to go back. So thank you for that.
Super.
Thank you also for the brilliant insights that you've brought to the table in terms of the domain knowledge about your fund, what are you thinking, where you're going, the whole sustainability, and the
Sure.
opportunities from the Indian context. So, with
Sure.
that, it is a time to say thank you to the audience for logging in today. It is thank you to Echo Events for helping us stream this. Thank you to you, Amit, for being
Thank you so
here.
much.
Yeah, and with that,
Yeah.
it is me, your host Preeti Chaudhary, saying bye from Amit and me on this edition of VC Spotlight with Amit Grover, founder and managing partner of Grover and Company. Until the next time, stay sustainable, stay safe, and stay all right. Thank you.
Thank you.